Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well today. Today we look into the idea of special senses, that we have the ability to detect very particular stimuli, and we're actually going to focus on vision today. So, how is it that we can convert light energy into the perception of images? All right. So, we know that in our head, we have concentration of certain special senses like smell, taste, hearing, and of course, sight. Today, we're going to focus on sight using particular receptors that detect photons of light. All right, so here let's into the eyeball. Let's begin by looking at anatomy, right? First look at structure and then we look at function. So we start with the eyelids. The eyelids are there to be able to protect your eyes from any sort of damaging objects that may strike it. Additionally, embedded around the eyes are glands, like these tarsal glands, that produce a fluid that helps lubricate the eye. Now, covering the front of the eye is a clear membrane called the conjunctiva. And again, it secretes, or it's helps produce this lubricating mucus that allows us to sort of move our eyes with little friction and blink the eyelids with little friction. Of course, this is a mucous membrane, and here it's exposed to the outside world. So you can have bacteria land on that membrane and infect it and cause what's called conjunctivitis, or what people commonly refer to as pink eye. So pink eye is an eye infection infecting that membrane that covers the surface of the eye. Eyelids are there to protect, and we've got that conjunctiva, another mucous membrane, to produce that lubricating fluid so we can move our eyes around with little friction. So here you can sort of see there's the eyeball, and here are the membranes that help protect that. All right. Now we're going to look at the idea of tears. So you constantly have stuff landing on your eyes, but you need to clear that away. So that's where tears come in. So we have a lacrimal gland. It's a tear-producing gland that actually sits above our eyes, and then it uses gravity to sort of wash the tears over the eyes. And then, of course, as you blink it, it spreads the tears around. So the lacrimal glands produce tears, and then tears contain the enzyme lysozyme. Of course, lyse means to split. So this is an enzyme in our tears that helps break down bacteria and keep our eyes clean. So then tears collect in these little canaliculi, these tiny little canals, and then they collect in a tear duct, and then it goes down to the back of our throat. So again, the tears are created in glands above your eyes. They sort of wash over your eyes. Your eyelids blink and spread those tears around. It helps break down the bacteria that land on your eyes from the air. Then they collect in tear ducts, and then it goes down to the back of your throat. So we do end up swallowing our tears. I don't know what sort of metaphor that is for what we face in life, but tears help keep our eyes clean and lubricated. And again, it travels down the back of your throat. Now, of course, if you have a lot of debris hitting your eyes, you're out and dust is blowing in your eyes, or you have a welling of emotions, you can actually increase the production of those tears. And the tears are produced faster than they can drain through these little canaliculi. And that's when tears spill over the front of your eyes. So tears may collect at the bottom of your eyes, but that's just because they can't drain out fast enough. The tears are actually produced above your eyes and spread down over your eyes, and then again, typically drain to the back of your throat. But if you increase the production of tears, then they don't drain quickly enough, and then that's when we see, tears spilling out over the front of the eyes. If a person is having like allergies, the inflammation or the irritation can cause an increased production of tears, and then if you have a bunch of inflammation, that will block the ducts, and again, you get these sort of itchy, watery eyes. Here we are. There you can see the lacrimal gland. Those tears are produced. Here are the little canaliculi, and here's the lacrimal duct that drains the tears back to the bottom or the back of your throat. All right. Additionally, there are extrinsic eye muscles. Exo means outside of. So extrinsic eye muscles attach outside the eyeball. It looks really robotic or mechanistic, right? But what they allow you to do is turn the eyeballs. So you can move your eyeballs in different directions, and that allows you to sort of focus the light on the retina in the back of your eye where the photoreceptors are. But those extrinsic eye muscles are really important because, again, they help position the eyeball so that you can take in the information you're interested in. Tracking is the ability to follow an object. You can imagine looking at a bird flying across the sky. Usually your eyeballs both track in the same direction at the same time, but we can perform what's called convergence, which is what we just usually refer to as crossing your eyes. If you're looking at something close, your eyes can actually both turn inward so that you can try and focus on whatever is closer to your face. Hey, those muscles up close. All right, so now let's move to looking at the inside of the eyeball. So, oops, let me back this out just a little bit here. Well, let's just sort of describe the inside of the eyeball. It's hollow, but it's filled with sort of like a gelatinous fluid. And in there is a lens that bends. So we have a bendable lens to focus light on the back of the eye. Okay. So again, you have this sort of hollow structure that's filled with a clear fluid. And inside of that is a lens that is bendable. And that lets you bend the light so it actually focuses on the photoreceptors in the back of the eye. And there are anterior and posterior chambers, or little rooms. So there is a little room at the front of the eye and a little room at the back of the eye. And again, we'll sort of get into that. All right. So here we see the eye a little closer. Here is that anterior chamber. It's filled with a certain type of fluid. And then in the posterior chamber, there is a different type of fluid. And here is that bendable lens. All right, so we'll sort of start with the outside of the eye and work our way in. So the outside layer of the eye, the white part of the eye, is called the sclera. Okay, so the sclera is made of these really tough proteins that make the eye pretty strong. So your eyeballs have sort of a tough, rubbery outer layer made of these proteins of the sclera. Now, what's really cool is these proteins, if they change orientation, they become transparent, and that's what happens at the front of your eye. So the sclera, the white of your eye, is these tough proteins arranged in a particular direction. But if you reorient those proteins, then it becomes clear or transparent, and that's what we have in the cornea. The cornea is basically the window in the front of the eye. And so what the cornea does is allow light to actually pass into the eye. So the white part, the sclera, it's opaque, right? Light's not going to pass through it. But the cornea in the front is able to allow light to pass through. Oh, here, just have a quick video to watch.
Hey, boss, what did we do about him? Do what I said. Don't shoot until you see the whites of their eyes. Got it? Got it.
Okay. Yeah, I've forgotten about that. That was just sometimes in the movies you hear people say, don't shoot until you see the whites of their eyes. And of course, they could just as easily say, don't shoot until you see the sclera. Okay. But anyway, when I looked up that phrase, that was like the first video that came up. So we have that. Okay, so here again, if we look, here is the sclera. It's that outer tough fibrous protein. And of course, if you rearrange the proteins, then you wind up with the cornea, the clear window at the front of the eye. One thing that's sort of wild is you can do corneal transplant surgeries. So sometimes people have damaged corneas, and what they can do is actually cut out the cornea and then put in a donor cornea. Or what they're able to do is actually stitch it in. So here you see the stitches, and then there's even the light in the operating room. You can see the lights there, but you can actually numb the eyes, cut out the cornea, and then stitch in a new donor cornea, and then these stitches will eventually dissolve. So pretty wild stuff that can be done with the eyes. Here's a good video on the lens.
At this monastery outside Kathmandu, Dr. Sandukruit is arriving with a mission. He may not be a household name, but his work has touched millions. He hopes to restore the sight of all these people who suffer from cataracts. An estimated 150,000 people in Nepal are blind because of cataracts. 60-year-old Ganimaya Lama has been blind in both eyes for over a year.
I've cried for months. I have to depend on my grandchildren even to walk. I told them to push me off the cliff, but they refused to.
Hundreds of people from neighboring districts started gathering here since last night. Over the next 2 days, Dr. Rohit with his team will operate on around 200 people who are partially or totally blind. Dr. Rohit removes the damaged cataract safely and replaces it with a synthetic lens. The entire procedure requires no stitches.
Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. I jumped.
At this monastery outside Kathmandu,
Here, let me sort of skip ahead. In the video, what they're showing there is they put a slice in the cornea, and then you can remove the lens and then put in an artificial lens. So here we go.
or totally blind. Dr. Rohit removes the damaged cataract safely and replaces it with a synthetic lens. The entire procedure
goes the
requires
lens.
no stitches and takes just 5 minutes.
When we started popularizing this technique around the world, and many of our own colleagues, particularly the ones from developed countries, thought that this is an inferior technique and it gives us suboptimal results.
Dr. Rohit proved them wrong. Not only do patients recover near perfect vision the day after the operation, the sterile technique can be used with ease in remote areas, reaching out to people like 64-year-old Bhim Bahadur. He was born deaf and mute. For 2 years, he's also been blind.
This technique has really gone beyond borders globally, and in many parts of Africa, South America, and Asia, and even in developed countries, people do
There
it.
goes the new lens.
Dr. Rohit himself has performed over 100,000 operations. Doctors from as far afield as the USA and North Korea come to train under him.
Only $20 to $25 is enough to provide for cataract surgery with a lens. And that's really been revolutionary in terms of being able to provide surgery to the masses.
Lenses manufactured in Nepal are exported to over 70 countries. In mobile camps like this one, treatment is free. The morning after the surgery, it's time for the bandages to come off.
It's like looking at God.
I'm proud of my patients, and I'm in their hearts, and they are in my hearts. That's what I really say.
These tears of joy are priceless. With each 5-minute surgery, Dr. Rohit gives his patients a vision of a better future. Sabina Shrestha, Al Jazeera, Kulari Monastery in Nepal.
That's pretty remarkable stuff, being able to do that. So, the cornea is the window in the front, but light also passes through the lens. So the lens could be damaged by UV radiation and smoking, things of that nature. So for people like in Nepal, if they're living at higher elevations, they're exposed to more intense UV light. So again, life at higher elevation can lead to increased damage to that lens, and then the energy damages the proteins, and so the lens becomes cloudy. And if the lens becomes cloudy, that's like trying to look through a really dirty window. It diffracts the light. The light sort of spreads out, and you can't focus things, and so you can't see. So this is really spectacular to be able to put a plastic lens in. It was a little gruesome when they put the needle in the guy's eye to numb his eye. That was sort of rough to watch, but it's amazing that in 5 minutes you could install a new lens that can allow a person to see. So here's just another little clip. Oops. Oh, sorry. Looks like I can't watch that. All right. So the outer layer is the sclera. That's the protective layer. Now we're going to go to the vascular layer where the blood vessels are. So this middle layer is called the choroid layer. So it has the blood vessels, so it supplies the oxygen and the nutrients. Additionally, it's darkly pigmented. And you want that dark pigment in there because think about what white does. White reflects light, right? So the outer layer, the sclera, is white, so it's reflecting light. You don't want the interior of your eye to be white because then light will just be bouncing around all over the place. So we have this darkly pigmented layer in the eye, so it absorbs light energy, and you don't have a whole bunch of excess light bouncing around. Let's see. Now, we just looked at that lens. The lens is actually bendable. But what holds it are these little muscles called ciliary bodies. So the muscles in the ciliary bodies can contract or relax, and that will actually bend the lens. And when it bends the lens, then it's going to alter the path of light and allows you to focus on something on the back of the retina. Let's see. Now, the iris is another muscle in this layer. This is a smooth muscle, so we don't have conscious control over it. But those muscles can constrict or relax, and what that will do is open or close the pupil in your eye. So the pupil looks like a little dark hole, because that's exactly what it is. The pupil is a hole in the eye that light passes through, and that hole is surrounded by the iris, which is the smooth muscle. So the muscles can constrict to allow less light in or dilate to allow more light in. So that allows you to control the amount of light passing through the eye. So they're the little ciliary bodies, and then the little fibers are called ciliary zonules, and they pull on the lens. There is the iris, and then the middle is the hole here, and that's the pupil. And so light will pass through the cornea and pass through the pupil, strike the lens, and then light will bend and hit this inner part of the eye where the photoreceptors are. So the interior portion is the sensory layer. So the outer layer is the sclera, the choroid is the middle layer with the blood vessels and the pigment, and then the innermost layer is the sensory layer. So the sensory tissue is called the retina. So the retina, again, it has pigmentation to help absorb light energy, and then it has this neural layer. And the neural layer has specialized receptors called rods and cones. So the rods have evolved to work best under lower light conditions, and they don't have as great of color perception, but what they do really well is help you detect motion. So if you put your hands at the side of your head and wiggle your fingers, you may not see color particularly well, but you can detect motion really well. And again, under dimmer light conditions, the rods work well to allow you to, again, sort of notice what's going on in terms of movement. The cones, on the other hand, we have 3 different types of cones, and the cones detect different wavelengths of light that we perceive as different colors. So the combination of cones that are activated by the different wavelengths of light allow us to perceive different colors or combinations of colors. Now, there is an area in the back of the retina that's called the fovea centralis. The fovea centralis is really important because this is the area where you have your greatest visual acuity. It's where you see the sharpest. So if you're looking at something, you're actually focusing light on your fovea centralis, and then everything else is a little blurrier, right? So only a small portion of your whole visual field, like 5% of your visual field, is what you focus on, and then everything else is a little blurrier. And again, it's about detecting motion. So the fovea centralis is super important because that's where you see the best. And what happens is that the fovea centralis has only cones in it. Okay, so what that does is it sort of gives us evidence of sort of how we evolved to be active. The cones detect these different colors of light, which are best seen during the day. So we've evolved to be active during the daytime. We see the best during the daytime. And that's evidenced by the fact that we have all cones, which operate best under bright light, focused in your fovea centralis. Now, these are neurons, so they have long axons, and then they'll send signals to the visual cortex in the back of your brain. So the wires all run out the back of your eye through what's called the optic disc. Now, the optic disc is your blind spot. We all have like a literal blind spot where we can't see things. And that's because all those axons are leaving the back of the eye through the same point. It's sort of like, I don't know if you've seen like entertainment centers where people have like cabinets where they keep TVs and Blu-ray players and PlayStations and Xboxes, whatever. If all the wires sort of exit at the same point at the back of the entertainment center, that's sort of what it's like in our eyes. We have our retina with all the photoreceptors, and there's one spot where all the axons leave out, and that's the blind spot. Now, your brain sort of makes things up and fills in the rest, but we do all have a blind spot, and we'll test this in lab activities. All right, so here's just a nice depiction of the 3 layers. The sclera is on the outside in white, the choroid layer is red in the middle, And then the sort of golden color is the neural layer that has the retina. Here, this little bump will be your fovea centralis. That's where you have only rods and they're packed in tightly. And that's where you focus the light in the back of your eye. And then here's the optic disc where all the wires basically run out the back of the eye. This is zooming in a little closer. So here's the pigmented layer that absorbs the light energy. Here you see in purple and gold the rods and cones. And what happens is when the light is absorbed by the retina, different wavelengths of light will change the shape of molecules inside the rods and cones, causing them to depolarize or send action potentials. And then those action potentials signal to other neurons, send action potentials. And then eventually all these wires join together and they'll run out the back of your eye through that optic disc. All right, I think that wraps it up here on the anatomy. We'll come back and look at physiology here in just a moment. Thank you much.